Welcome to another episode of Creative Leaders Unplugged, the podcast brought to you by Future Skills Academy. I'm Morgan here with Arna, and today we're talking to Alizée Bollen. She's very socially conscious and aware designer, half Congolese, half Belgian, Tanzanian upbringing.
Yeah. Very profound. I don't know, to show this whole idea of her, that new company or venture or project that she's doing called Crampy, that on so many different levels it resonates. It's sort of, right? So there's so many different angles to it, and it's such an interesting project, but not, also because it's so personal to her. But then again, it is such a big topic.
Yeah.
In society, really, that sometimes is really not talked about, and she kind of makes that explicit in really fun and confrontational ways. And I don't know. I was as a facilitator, I was like, can I facilitate for one of those sessions? It's so interesting to
Yeah.
I would love to be kind of part of one of those sessions, or just kind of be fly on the wall or something. And just kind of, because the way she does it, because she's so passionate about it, but it's such a personal
Yeah.
thing. So also how she would deal with that being very personal, but at the same time, so general,
Yeah.
as a topic, and then the other layers, talking about things that are uncomfortable, being in an uncomfortable space, or saying things that are very personal to you, but affect who you are and affect how you relate to other people, and it will affect the sort of the meetings and the teams and the whatever the organization that you work in or for, but you don't talk about it because it's not something you talk about because it's so personal. But then it's there. It's just
Yeah.
So anyway, I was like, wow,
It's really
so
brilliant.
cool.
And she said that she just got started facilitating. And then the more that she explained about the project, I was like, this is bloody brilliant. Oh, no pun
Yeah.
intended, but it kind of works in this example.
Yeah, it's bloody brilliant. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it is. It is. And I'm kind of jealous of young people like her, not just because she's young and I'm not anymore, but also that too, by the way. No, what I mean is that I'm always thinking like, what was I doing?
Yeah.
How come she has this amazing topic and can kind of run with it, and it's like, so inspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring. And she has a clear vision and just, this is something I want to do the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
that's I've never had that clear a vision on anything.
I know.
What is
Exactly.
that like?
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, where did that come from? I was like, I don't know what to do. I do a million things and I don't really know who I am. And she's like, this is it. And this is my topic. And this is important. And it's relevant. And it's so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed to listen to someone who also really does work and does the kind of, the thing that she does, it has a clear connection to who she is. So it's
Yes.
not disconnected. There's no disconnect between what she does and who she is and what she stands
No,
for or
they
where
are
she
the
came
same.
from.
They are the
They're the
same.
same. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not always the case, right?
That's very true. That's very true. And no, her Venn diagram is one circle, and that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Interesting.
Well, you have some people, it's like their professional selves and their personal selves.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
she shares about her life growing up and how yeah. It's a
Yeah,
very,
it's all the same kind of energy and the same kind of questions and the same kind of experience and the same kind of search and the same kind of dealing with the same issues and same problems throughout her young life. So yeah, exactly. So a lot of people kind of, you stumble into things and you go like, huh, I never thought I would do this. In her case, you go like, no, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It's a circle.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
So
Yeah, it
I hope,
makes me jealous. That makes me jealous. Yes. All right.
yeah, and really excited to watch what she keeps doing.
Yes.
So Alizée and I went to school together, but I had lived a life previously to school, and I think she's a bit,
You.
believe it or not. Yeah, no, I went to school when I was closer to 30 for my bachelor's. So I
Hmm.
had lived a bit more life than some of my other classmates. But so she's, yeah, like I said, she's catching the wave of this, yeah, of
Yeah, because
make
you
her
see
mark.
her as, yeah, so she's riding this wave, and the way you know her and seeing what she does, you see this is a talent. This is someone, she's going to go far.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Your prediction
Definitely.
here.
She
Okay.
already is. I mean, she already is. But yeah.
Okay.
So
Cool. Well, I'm curious to see. We'll come back to this in a few years, and
follow up. Yes.
yeah, that'd be really cool. No, but anyway, all kidding aside, I really thought, because again, we talked about how, not just in the medical world, the world of healthcare and medicine, how there's so little known about the female body.
Hmm.
It's like crazy. So but it's also in society in general, like how little we actually know, right? Or talk about or accept, and it's not just about the sort of female experiences, but and biology, but also just in general, like how so many things we don't talk about. And I don't sometimes. So when in a conversation like we just had, I sometimes just don't understand why. How do we get into a situation where you are working for a business with people, with your colleagues, and you have to hide all these other things,
Hmm.
that are personal to you, because they're not, they're relevant to the business. They're not relevant to whatever you're doing professionally, but it is.
But it is because it's impacting how I show
Of
up that day.
course it is. Like,
Yeah.
how did we get into the situation that we tell ourselves that we can kind of separate these two things? I think we're so crazy lying to ourselves. I'm not, I mean, I do really like a conspiracy theory every now and then because they're funny.
Me too.
Yeah, so they can be really awesome. Like, the world is flat. I love that. It's so awesome. But, so yeah, I like that. But in this case, the conspiracy theory I have is that it's something we do to ourselves, is saying we have, there's work and there's private life, which is
Hmm.
not true.
No.
It is not true. There is only life. You take it, there's no such thing as I leave my job, at the office. No, you don't. Actually, now you don't, because you're working from your kitchen. So, right. So it's not true. It's just never been true. But
Yeah.
it's a big conspiracy, to kind of, I don't know, lie to ourselves that it's okay to be unhappy and not be yourself when you go to the office,
On
which
company
is,
time. Yeah.
yeah, but
But
it
your
is,
life clock is still ticking.
yeah, it's ticking,
Yeah.
and it's taking away, a bit of, the life quality. It's taking away a bit of happiness,
Hmm.
and all that, and we're okay with that because it's just a job. It's like, okay, anyway. So that was one
Yeah.
of the things I was like. There's so many things here that she's talking about that resonates so much.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very focused topic, menstruation, but it impacts so much. And I hope you guys capture that essence when you dive into the conversation with us. So.
Yeah. Okay. Enjoy.
So I'm half Belgian, half Congolese, but I grew up in Tanzania. And I think that kind of sets the tone for the complexity of the person that I am and the fact that I come from different cultures. I would also say that I am creative and I enjoy community a lot. I think that's what I would say. I don't know if that summarizes everything.
I
Yeah.
think yeah, like you said, it shares some of the complexity. And so you said you're half Congolese, half Belgian, and
Mhm.
then you grew up in Tanzania. So were you born in Tanzania?
No, I was just born in Belgium, and I think we did like a year. And then my family, well, my mom, my dad, and I moved to Tanzania, and I just kind of, yeah. grew up there. I don't really remember being in Belgium, of course, because I was like 1 or something. And I was there until I was 16. And then after that, I had a very short stint of 2 years in the UK. And then I moved to the Netherlands, which is where I have been ever since. Yeah.
Nice. And so then what was it like for you? Because I think your dad's Belgian, right?
Mhm.
Your mother's Congolese.
Mhm.
And then you're growing up in Tanzania. What was that like for you? Did you feel like you had a different experience than people who maybe were, both their parents from Tanzania?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we didn't really grow up with family around per se. Like our closest family were either in Congo, which is, I mean, Tanzania shares a border, but Congo has been at war for 25 years, which is the reason I did not live there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, my mom left kind of as a refugee in that sense. So that's why we couldn't really go back.
Yeah.
A very privileged refugee, I'll say that, but nonetheless. And then also on my dad's side, all of our families like in Europe spread out and so on. So I didn't really grow up with the notion that family was like your immediate like blood relatives, but more just like your neighbor is your family and your friends are your family. But I will say that like around Christmas and so it became quite evident that we didn't really have family there, but it was never like a sad thought. It was more just like, oh, I don't have cousins here. But then I also had like my friends and my friends' cousins, and then they were somehow like my family as well. And also, when I moved to Tanzania as a baby, I obviously spoke French predominantly because that's what both my parents spoke, that's what I spoke. And my mom recently told me that when I started school, I would just cry for weeks and weeks because I had no idea what anybody was talking about. Because I was
Oh,
French speaking, and obviously there's like a phase where you bring a child to school for the first time and they're crying. But for me, it was just like, I don't know what you people are talking about. And now it's so funny because 26 years later, I am predominantly English speaking. So that completely changed like 180 at some point in my life. And that's also been quite interesting now living on this side of the world and being around French speaking people and also realizing to what extent maybe I would have been a different person if I had, I don't know, spoken French growing up and things like that. Or at least in the school context.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what would have been different, do you think?
I think culturally, like now that I live here, when I do meet other French speaking friends, like I have quite a few friends who are from like other African countries or from France or Belgium and so on. There's a lot of cultural things that I don't understand, like even like verbally when they say jokes or they refer to something on TV. I'm just like, I have no idea who this, like, everybody has like local artists and people they see on TV, and I have no idea what they're talking about. I didn't even like my name Alizée, for example. There is a singer called Alizée in French media. I never knew that until I moved here
Oh.
because I would never have like interacted with that at all. So it's like just some cues that I miss. And last weekend it was my uncle's wedding in Belgium, and I can go there and like be with my family, but in the larger context of conversations, I get very lost. Like it's a bit of a culture shock, even though it is technically my culture in that sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
But what did it do you think? It might be a bit of a difficult question, but being in the culture that you were in and being a
Mhm.
bit lost there as well, at the start at least, not being
Mhm.
able to speak the language, not knowing what people are talking about. What do you think that did to you as
Um,
a person? Sort of, are there things that you now can reflect on and go like, oh, this is why I learned to do something, or I have a specific way of acting towards situations in a certain way. Do you know what kind of, have you
um,
reflected on that?
yeah, I think I would say I'm still relatively good with languages to
Mhm.
date.
Mhm.
Like I don't find it hard to pick up on languages because not only did I start learning English at that age going into school, but I was also in Tanzania and they speak Swahili, so I had like two languages like smashed into my head at the same time. And I actually recently witnessed it with my uncle's daughter because we speak to her in French, English, and Swahili. And I
Yeah.
saw how long it took for her to start speaking. She would understand everything, but it was really hard for her to get words out. And it's just because now she does speak, she speaks all of them. you know? And so when I thought about like how that might have impacted me as a kid, it's just like this ability to just absorb language. But then on the flip side of that, I think I'm really good at communicating non-verbally as well, because I think that's the only way that I survived then. So I pick up a lot on like people's, like, how do you say that, physical cues, like a change in
Mhm.
tone, a change in body language and things like that, which can be good and sometimes also very like nerve-wracking, you know, like somebody's just, if somebody breathes like I'll be like, oh my God, they're mad, you know? But it's that's not the case, but sometimes it is, you know, sometimes that
Yeah.
is a visual cue that somebody is upset or uncomfortable. And sometimes they're literally just breathing. And I feel like that's probably something I picked up then, because when I was in the room with all these kids not understanding, I had to just like watch them and just kind
Yeah.
of understand what they're saying through like them flailing their hands in the air, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
And
so interesting. Yeah.
it's very interesting. And you said also when you were explaining, who you are as a person, you said that you're also somebody who's very creative.
Mhm.
Have you always been creative?
I think so, at least from what I'm gonna say. I think in the beginning it came from my mom has always had like an atelier, like you said, like she makes clothing.
Hmm.
And it was first watching her do that. I remember my grandma used to bring me these, like, what are they called? Oh my goodness. They were like these fashion books, and you can draw on top of these models as a kid. And I used to just like draw on top
Ah,
of them.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. And you could like get stickers and stuff. And obviously, I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
stickers because I was in Tanzania. So I had to like draw on and paint on, and I would like stick leaves and stuff on them. And yeah, so I think that was like the first earliest memory I have of creativity. But then there's like this whole other side. I remember growing up, my father is an engineer and he's also a pilot now, and he's really into like building things a lot, like relentlessly, and sometimes over engineering things. And so there was an element of creativity that was very, not just like sketching or like imagining things, but like very tangible, which I've always had from a young age. And I remember he bought us this like Meccano set. I don't know if you know what they are,
Hmm.
like the adult version with like the electronics and the wiring
Oh,
and like
so
the
cool.
screwdrivers and so on. So we skipped on like the plastic baby version, and he just went straight into like the metal one. And we would like build like cars and stuff together. And because my dad's an engineer, he would make sure that the car would like actually drive. And I remember once for school, we had to make these like sand timers. You know, it was like a creative activity at school. And I was like, I came home, I was like, Dad, I'm gonna, get a, I don't know, a cup and put sand in it, and it's gonna flip over and it's gonna be 1 minute. And I was like, no, we're gonna build something with the mechanos. And we ended up building like this intricate contraption that would like attach to the side of the table. And then you would pour sand on top, and like this weight would drop. And I was like, what in the, I don't know, Egyptian mechanics are we building right now? And so there was like these very like more creative, fluid drawing, sketching. And then my dad was like, creativity is also like problem solving and building things. And that's just what I grew up around always.
Really cool. Really,
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. So that, I mean, because one of the things that, we all know that, but sometimes you forget that you take so much from your parents. And it's not just because DNA, it's also just the kind of the surrounding, the context, what you see,
Hmm.
the possibilities that they show you.
Hmm.
So it's interesting how, a lot of people actually, when we ask about their childhood, and often they then discover like, oh yeah, because my parents did this, or they were these kind of people, and oh yeah, that actually affects the way I now do things, or the way I see things, or the way I relate to other people, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the childhood, and I'm not sure if we already started recording, but we talked about sort of kids being at school, learning how to kind of behave in a certain way or to think in a certain way, and that really affects you in later in life when you learn how to, mainly think very linear and try to kind of please your teacher. What do they want? What is the answer they want? And if you get the answer that the teacher wants, then you're doing fine, but you can't change the question. Really important at school. Go like, I don't like the question. Can I change the question a little bit? Or you can't be creative with that, right? So it's all about very linear. And in a way, thinking about, even though it was really uncomfortable for you being at school when you don't speak the language and you have to watch body language, but it also means that you somehow, I think it really does wire your brain differently. It
Yeah,
does do,
definitely.
right? Because as children, it's just very simple. Your brain is developing in a way that's really interesting, I thought, because in a way, when you're a baby, all the connections are still there. It's all there. It's actually you're losing connections because it's specializing. Your brain starts specializing in the things it needs to know, right?
Mhm.
So if you do things like language or music or art or creativity as a kid, these connections become stronger and they become available to you later in life. You can still always reshape your brain, by the way. That's another thing. But so I think, you growing up in the way you did has also kind of, programmed your brain, rewired your brain in a certain way that you
Yeah.
have these abilities available to you that makes you, recognizing body language, for instance, something that some people really have a hard time doing. And you
Yeah.
might be oversensitive.
Yes, definitely.
but but it's better than being completely kind of blind to body language, at least because that's part of empathy. That's part of knowing what people actually are saying when they're not saying it, right?
Mhm.
It's better to say, hey, is something going on? And then because you sense something. And I think when someone does what you just described, like something like there is something going on, they might not say it, but I think you're right. I think
It's time
I
to go
think you
investigate.
Yes. No, I bet there is something there because,
Yeah.
I have kids at home and they do that all the time. And then they say, no, no. Or my wife actually also does that every time. And she'll go like, ah. And I go, what's wrong, honey? But we speak Dutch, by the way, but
Yeah.
it's not really what I say, but
Mhm.
I say, what's wrong, honey? And then she says, no, nothing, and I know,
Mhm.
I
I mean,
know
the
there's
trick
something.
there is to not take it personal until they answer your question, because I think that's where I
Mhm.
forget sometimes, is like, are you breathing because of me, or are you just breathing because you had a rough day and you're still happy
Yeah.
with me, but you still like, that's where I have to be like, okay, I should
Yeah.
also breathe now. And then go,
Yeah. I should also breathe.
it
Good
might
idea.
it might have nothing to do with me. But while you were talking about like teachers asking questions and you answering, I think that's one thing that my dad always went above and beyond. Like this thing with the sand, the question was just build something with sand. And he was like, no, we're going to go bigger. So, in that sense, my dad was always like, but you can always go bigger, you know? And that's where his over engineering mind comes in. And I think that's also why sometimes I have a tendency to sometimes it's over delivering, but sometimes it's just like I can give you so much more than what you asked for energy, because I know that, like, why stop? Like, why would I give you half if I know that you could have all of this? You might not use it, but oh, just smashed my table. You might not use it, but at least you know about it. And I think that was something that has always been there. And it has come with like pros and cons. And like I said, over delivering sometimes and overextending oneself. But it also comes with like whole new, like discovering new insights and things like that, and surprising clients. So it's kind of like a toss up there as well. And I will say that growing up, at least where I grew up in Tanzania, in my village, in my home context, we also didn't really have access to technology in that sense until much later. Like some people, funnily enough, I was at this workshop recently. People were like, "Oh, what was your first email?" And everybody had like a really funny one because they made an email when they were like 6 or 7 or maybe a little bit older. And I was like, "Oh, my first email is the one I have now." Like I don't. For me, when I got access to the internet and things like that, I was much older, so it was always like a very like formal setting. There was no like lollipop 6,000 at Yahoo or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was reflecting a lot on like just how I grew up, that I had to be outside. I had to be doing something creative or playing with other people. There wasn't ever like a moment of, oh, I'm just going to turn the TV on and just sit there, until I was much older, which I'm very, very thankful for. And I reflect back a lot now with my brother, my one sibling. And I'm so grateful. And that's also a reason why I would love to, if I have children, also have them in Tanzania or in a similar environment, because I really enjoyed this very much like outdoors living. And it's still very hard for me now living in Europe and being very confined to indoor spaces.
Yeah. And where
Yeah.
are you living these days?
I live in Amsterdam. I
Okay.
live in a specific area, the Bijlmer, Amsterdam Southeast, which is a very nice area, if I have to say so myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Nice. I'm not familiar with the area. So, and I'm sure not everyone listening as well, but like, what is the area like? Because when I think of Amsterdam, and of course I've been to visit, countless times, but I think of very crowded, very busy, there's always so many things to do.
Yeah.
But it's very compact. It's very
Yeah.
compact.
So where I live is Amsterdam Southeast, which is with the metro about 20 minutes out from the city center. So you're not really in that tourist bubble at all, except for if there's a Taylor Swift concert, because I live right next to the arena, which is where all the concerts happen. But Amsterdam Southeast is predominantly Black and people of color community here in Amsterdam. And so there's a lot of like African shops, Indian shops, and so on. And so for me, that's been super helpful in terms of like even finding the types of food ingredients that I need to cook with and things like that. So that's been really enjoyable. And just walking through and like hearing languages that I'm familiar with, which is very different than when I go 20 minutes into the city and also hear languages that I'm familiar with, but from a completely different context, like I'll
Sure.
hear French, things like that. I'll hear British people in the streets. And then here it's more like I might actually run into somebody who's from Tanzania or from the Congo. So it's like kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I don't realize it. And I'm to the point now where I can understand a lot of Dutch, but my speaking still isn't there. But so if I walk by somebody like on a terrace, I might kind of roughly understand what they're talking about. And I'm like, okay, she's talking about a work situation. But when I go back to United States and everybody's speaking English, like I just feel my body relax because I don't have to spend that energy, deciphering what's happening.
Yeah, it's definitely a shift. Also, in the companies I've worked in, if you go from like a predominantly Dutch speaking environment to English, there's definitely like you're not constantly translating, and also I'm more present because I have the same. I understand Dutch. I think now if you talk to me, like I can keep up with you. I can also kind of talk back as well, but it involves a lot of like I have to really focus on you, whereas if it's English I'll just absorb the information, kind of just like crossfire. So it's like almost it's a little bit tedious in that sense of like, okay, I now have to really put my attention on you, focus, align all my brain cells, live translate everything you're saying, and then like respond. Whereas if it's just in English or even in French, it just goes like straight through.
So one thing, wondering, where did English come from all of a sudden? Because you said, you mostly live now in a sort of English speaking bubble, but I don't hear, I mean, you lived in the UK for a very short time, but in the Netherlands, as far as I can tell, most people still speak Dutch. Although, to be honest, in Amsterdam, if I go into any shop or any restaurant, they speak English to me. So, so is
The
that
most Dutch looking Dutchman, one of the most Dutch looking Dutchmen I've ever met, and they still speak English. Yes.
they do. Yeah. How can I help you? Like, yeah. So no, but where did that come from?
Yeah, good question.
What do you mean, like the
Well,
Like,
your
did you
English.
did you grow up speaking English also?
For me personally,
Yeah.
oh, it was through school. I went to school. I went to British International School, so I had to learn English. And also, when I moved to the UK, I also speak English. So I started speaking French, but now I mostly speak English. Like even with my sibling, it's just with my parents that I now speak French. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most of the work you're doing then is also in English, I assume.
Yes, and the company I work for now is German. So I'm also venturing out into German.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's interesting. So it means, somehow you're always kind of sort of in a situation where you have to go, what's this language?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting. That is
Yeah.
interesting because I don't know. I have to process that information for a bit because because it's so interesting that somehow the way you grow up, it's still kind of with you in a very practical sense. That you're now like, oh, now I have to kind of understand German, which is again a very different language, very complicated too, by the way,
Yes,
right?
I'm not. I don't think I'm going to catch on to this one like I did to Dutch. I don't think so. It's very complex, but I also think I put myself in situations where I'm not, because I'm not uncomfortable not speaking the language, then I'm okay to put myself in that situation. Like
Hmm.
it's never a barrier for me, even if I sit in the Berlin office and they're all speaking German, just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
like it doesn't really. It's just like another day,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just another day of me watching people and knowing
Yes,
exactly what they're actually saying without knowing what they're
With their
saying.
body language.
Yeah,
exactly.
he's sighing. He goes, you go like, oh, he is annoyed, and he's like, and they're very energetic. Let's go. Yeah. So no, but it is such an interesting because we do, sometimes we do work on empathy, right? And we have these activities where we put people in a situation where they feel how it is, for instance, to have Parkinson or to be, very old and having to kind of fiddle around with coins or with technology and so we put people in like suits so they feel really heavy and they have to do stuff like that. So putting people in a situation where they are uncomfortable to just to feel how that is, and in a way you put yourself out there as well, like you're gonna, in a way you're like the living example of someone who puts herself into situations where you are uncomfortable in a way, but being really comfortable with that and being sort of no being being sort of, so I do love to kind of put people in situations where they don't understand the language, just by just kind of it helps them sort of observe. And because we do a lot of ethnographic research, for instance, where we just would sit and observe people, and if you don't speak the language, so I actually find it really relaxing when I don't speak the language, because I don't. So it's just little sounds, and I don't mind. And it's like it's really relaxing. I remember being in Finland and being at a conference, and I had to speak at the conference, but then all the other people were speaking Finnish, and
Mhm.
Finnish is very difficult language. I have no comprehension. There's nothing connecting to the languages I do know, and I know some Scandinavian, some Norwegian, for instance, but no, I was like, what is this? But it's really soothing in a way. It was really comfortable. Like, I don't understand a word. I don't have to try because I'll never catch on. Because not even like a lot of languages would have little English words in it,
Mhm.
kind of, and that wasn't even there. So I was just looking at people and looking at how they behaved and how they moved. And that was interesting because all of a sudden you start observing things, and this is not a good thing to say, I guess, but when you're deaf, you know,
Mhm.
you know, in a way, if as an exercise, you kind of put people, in a situation where they can't hear and they just have to be in a meeting. I'm sorry, I'm going like, this is so cool. I'm going to do that as an exercise. I'm going to put people in a business meeting and just make sure they
Noise,
can't hear what they're saying and they just
noise
have to observe.
canceling.
Noise
Mhm.
canceling. Wouldn't that be awesome? And you're doing that all the time, by the way. So it's
Yes.
so that, but it's to me it would be I would love to be in a situation where I'm allowed not to listen and being in a really serious business meeting and just sit there, just observe, not hearing what they're saying, and just look at body language and then just making and then reporting back on that and
Do you
saying
think
because
we could get paid to do this? Be
well
like meeting
Probably
observer
isn't that
consultants?
yeah you just sit there in the corner and go
non-verbal
like
communication
yeah yeah exactly.
workshop.
We
Wouldn't
could,
that be
yeah.
great?
We could be the bad guy that's like, I noticed this whole meeting, you were very tense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were tense. Yeah. And
Everyone else noticed too.
yeah,
They just didn't dare say
yeah,
anything.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you think you're very unhappy at home and you're and you're like this
Like
midget.
a
You're like,
therapist in the background. It's
yeah,
like, I understand everything right now.
yeah. No, but it is sort of as facilitators. So, as creative facilitators, in a way, that is part of what we do, right? So we
Mhm.
we we step back and sometimes you observe the teams in the group, but so you're not only listening what they're saying, you're also listening to the sounds and how are they saying things, but also where are they standing, how are they standing, are they comfortable, are they kind of removed, are they, is their position somewhere else? And actually, Morgan, we met, at the school
Mm-hmm.
where we did this experiment on emergence, and we created we did an exercise in constellations, where we would have people just kind of position themselves in relation to the others in the room where they felt they belonged or felt comfortable, which is really can be kind of confrontational. And there was the students, she kind of I don't know where she went, but she went down the hallway as like, I don't feel comfortable at all. But you can't lie with your body, with your words, with your language. You can kind of, you can lie, or at least make it a bit
Remain
vague,
quiet.
or
Yeah.
remain quiet, or just say things that sound okay and comfortable. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. Okay. It's just like you say when someone goes like, huh, you say, what's wrong? You say, no, it's okay. I'm fine. Words can kind of actually be a limitation or a obstacle to really know what's going on. But your body, so if you this constellation, I'm going to do this exercise, by the way, with 130 people in a couple of
Oh,
weeks, which is weird.
yeah.
So
Have
I
you done
have them.
constellations before, Alizée?
Yes, we call it spectrums, but I think it's like
Ah,
pretty similar. I actually just started facilitating as well, so this is very interesting.
very cool. Okay. And for anybody listening that doesn't know what constellations is, there's like a question posed or a theme given, like in the example Arna's talking about, it's like, how do you feel, kind of like, how do you feel like you are connected to these group of people? And then that's when she positioned herself. Yeah. Much further
Out
away,
of the room,
which
and yeah.
created a really great conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because you can't lie with your body. So if as facilitator, so you're going to be an awesome facilitator, because the skill you have is the most difficult skill to learn as facilitator,
Yeah.
to not listen to what people are just saying, but what they're not saying, and their body language, and reporting back to them on them, saying, hey, I'm noticing this, or and when I started facilitating, I always thought when there was low energy or there was something, it just didn't flow. I thought it was my problem. I made a mistake. I did something wrong. But being able to know that, hey, I'm observing this, because you already have those antennas, you're observing this, and then you can go like, hey, I'm seeing this. Anyone else feel this? And then people usually say, oh yeah, thank you for, oh yeah, I thought it was just me. Oh, you see that too? Or it's like, oh yeah, oh thank you. Or
Yeah.
so that's
We
just
call
such a
that stinky fish when you point out the obvious.
oh, that's a good one. I like
I
that.
love
And
that.
yeah, so I started facilitating recently because I have this platform called Crampy where I talk about like menstrual equity and so on. And together with a friend of mine, Jasmine Nasab, we created this like workshop series on menstruation, understanding menstruation, and how to create more menstrually equitable workspaces. And so a lot of the work we do is like really like getting people used to being uncomfortable. And this is because you were just talking about the discomfort and so on, and it just reminded me. And we kick off every session throwing around this like tit-shaped ball. And already with the first session, I was like, this is not going to rub them well, but this is where we're going. And the first couple sessions, I think they mostly found it a bit funny, but like, okay, we're just throwing around a tit, whatever. And it was just like in the intro, like, what's your name? Throw the tit around, whatever. And then by the third session, one of the participants came and he's like, you guys are talking about really important things, like menstrual equity. And by now he's like really gotten into it. We've gone through empathy exercise. And he's like, you're talking about like really important things, but then you walk in and you're throwing this tit around, like you're kind of contradicting yourself. And I was like outwardly, yes, but if you're not even comfortable throwing a tit around, how is somebody supposed to be comfortable enough in this room to talk about their menstruation, something that we never ever talk about? So actually what I'm doing to you is normalizing discomfort as soon as I walk into the room. And for him, that was such oh, I see. Because I was like, yeah, now that we've had 3 sessions, you've had 3 sessions to come and ask me about this. You could have asked me this on the first session. So it's like super interesting to get people to like really like feel that discomfort, and then also like And he was one of the people in the first session was like slumped over, like kind of sneaking on his phone. And by the third session was like completely like body language shift. And I would say as a facilitator, that is like the most exciting thing. And it was just by really like addressing him, pointing our attention towards him, and like really giving him a moment to like voice what he wants to say. And what has been really important for us in our workshops is if there's something that you're afraid to say it, that's what you should say to us so that we can answer it. Don't leave this room and go discuss it. I want you to, for example, I was so excited when he asked. I was like, finally, somebody's addressing the fact that we're throwing titties in this room. You know, I've been waiting.
Yeah.
3 sessions now. And so
That's
these are
very
the kind of questions that I find, open the most doors. And I feel like her walking out of the room was also this moment of like, finally, somebody brave enough to like
Yeah.
actually leave the room and have a conversation starter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this book as well called Theory U by
Mhm.
author Otto
Charmer.
Charmer.
Yeah.
And I think what you're talking about, the I'm fine, is like this second level of listening where you just listen to just respond. And there's this like very societal like script of like, it's almost immediate, like, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. You know, like it's very, you don't even think about it. It's automatic. And so that's been a major unlearning for me now as well with my friends when we talk to each other of like, how are you? And then it's like, okay, take a breath. Now answer me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are
What
you really? Yeah.
something I've learned from someone I work with for a long time. He's a psychologist, and he works a lot in change programs. But something I picked up from him, Michael Thorley is his name. When you're listening, Michael, thank you, Michael. I learned a lot from him, but one of the things I learned from him is that if you ask a question, you have to add why you're asking the question. So if you're saying, so for instance, someone can ask, Arna, why do you have a beard? And I will start kind of assuming things about why that question is asked, but I don't know why the question is asked. So if you say, I know why you have a beard, I see many people, men your age, having a beard. So I'm thinking, is that a trend? Or no, so I'm curious, why do you have a beard? Instead of me going like, she doesn't like my beard or something, or right, you have, because I try to kind of, my brain is trying to try to solve problems all the time. It's trying to kind of predict what's going to happen next. So it's a prediction machine. It's go like, this is happening. How do I survive this situation? What's supposed to happen? What is going to happen next? What's the intention? So it goes like, it makes all these assumptions. So you have to,
Processing.
so if you fill in the assumption saying, this is why I'm asking you the question, you get a better conversation. It's such a difficult and easy thing at the same time. So, but if you have conversation with your, so people listening, if anytime today, if you
Try
have a
this.
conversation, yes, we'll try it. Any question you ask, just add to it. Why are you asking the question? By the way, it will take a little longer for you to ask the question too, because you have to go like, why am I asking this question? Which is sometimes also a very good thing to kind of have a little moment to think, what exactly is it I'm trying to find out, or what am I asking? So your questions will probably be better too. But anyway, that's sort of kind of what you're kind of alluding to, right? So it's this.
I think that's beautiful. Also taking a moment for yourself to think about why you're asking the question. Because I think sometimes we ask questions because we feel like we have to. Do I even want to know how you are? Like, obviously that sounds really bad.
Well, hey,
But
listen, have you ever been to the States? People will ask you all the time, like, how are you? When the first time I was in the US, I was like early 20s or something. I went to the US for the first time. And I remember people asking like, hey, how are you? How are you? Or the way, and I would then go into like, oh, well, no, the answer to how are you is how are you? Which that never, that was so weird to me. Hey, how
Makes
are you?
sense.
Hey,
See,
how are
makes sense.
you? It's just a hello, right?
yeah.
But
That
then when
was
you go to Canada, people will actually want to know how are you. So that was also confusing because I went from the US and then I traveled to UK to Canada, and people ask how are you? They want to know.
yeah.
Like, oh, so
That was one of my first cultural shocks moving to the Netherlands, because you're just, oh, hey, how are you? And you keep walking. You don't stop to
you go like,
how are you? You keep walking. But then my one teacher, you remember Hannah, And she, oh, I had a wonderful summer holiday. Thank you for asking. I had such a good trip. Okay. And I just thought it was her. And then I realized other people would do the same thing as oh, it's me.
Like, I don't really want to know. Like, I don't really want to know how you are. No,
Yeah.
but it pause. So coming back to the time, to take the time. One of the things that if I run a training on things like design thinking or creativity or what have you, or even in all the coaching programs, one of the things that I always teach is, we call that the 5 seconds of silence. Because it's also when you do interviews, when you do research, when any conversation actually really is helped by asking a question and just count to 5 in your head before you start filling in the space. People are often uncomfortable. So it does two things. One is, if you want people to answer a question or you want them to talk, it becomes uncomfortable to them, so they start talking. So as a interviewer, journalists do this, because you're like, oh, it's the silence, because we're afraid of the silence. But in meetings in business, we fill in those gaps all the time, and then nobody can kind of raise their hand and say, well, wait a minute, maybe I don't agree, or because you don't have time to think, and you feel that you're interrupting all the time. And it's also a cultural thing, obviously. I mean, right, in the Netherlands, so I talk too much, clearly, and I need Morgan to kind of say, Arne, what about, stop or something or whatever, so I usually have, like, when I do facilitation, I have someone with me who can like, my
Help
good
steer the
colleague
ship a bit.
yeah,
Yes.
Yun will kind of, she even has a sign saying, Arne, move on, you know right. But so, for instance, so when I work with people from Asia, from China, for instance, I need to kind of keep, because they will not interrupt me.
Mm.
Right? Dutch people will interrupt me. They'll go like, yeah, okay, but what about,
Yeah.
but Asian people typically, in general, I'm generalizing a bit here, but still, typically, I really have to be aware of that. I need to also go like, so anyone, any question, and then go
Give it a moment.
give it a
Yeah.
very long moment. So then people go like, well, actually, but they are not used to that, because in business, people don't do it. You have 30-minute calls back to back, and there's no silence. There's no one kind of letting that silence. You don't create space. And so what you're talking about as a facilitator, you created a space, right, where people can have these conversations, and you're allowing people to be uncomfortable, and and they have to get used to that, right? And then when it's like, oh, I can challenge this. That's,
Yeah.
because we try to kind of, again, it's our brain, it's in our way. Our brains try to predict how should we behave to be, to survive this situation. And if you don't give them enough kind of cues or clues to say, this is how I want you to behave. Because again, we go back to school and kids, right? This is what I want from you. If you say, here's a tit,
Throw it.
that's your brain. My brain would go like, what do I supposed to, what's my behavior here? Do I smile? Is it funny? Is it weird? Do I comment? Do I say anything?
Yeah.
It's an intervention.
And in
Yeah.
Right?
this
You're
case, I
like,
would say leading by example is always the best. So if I find it funny, I will laugh, even if it makes everybody like, at least that's what I've been doing, and I'm getting more and more comfortable with being silly in these like more corporate contexts, because I can tell that at some point in this workshop series, we also involve leadership, and that also changes the energy in the room. And suddenly people are a bit, when I'm like, okay, then in this session, we're going to do an energizer where we all dance together. And then and I have to be the one who's really like, if we're going to dance, we're going to really dance. And I feel like there, when you allow yourself to also be uncomfortable, it also bridges that gap as well. At least that's what's worked for me, because I
I'm
feel like
so uncomfortable
you
dancing.
exactly.
Perfect.
So all the more reason for you to do it.
I'm
Yeah.
so uncomfortable. I'm so horribly uncomfortable dancing, because I'm really tall. I'm almost 2 meters tall. And everything in me says, you're too tall to dance. This is weird. You're looking weird. People are looking at you and they think, this guy's weird. How do other people move? I can't move
Your
like that.
shoulders in a different time zone
Where do
from
I
your
do?
knees. Yeah.
No, where do my hands go? I
Just
don't
close
know.
your eyes.
Is this normal? Am I looking okay? Am I like,
Yeah.
can I
Yeah.
get away with this? That's what in my head. when I'm dancing. So, hey.
I think, yeah, dancing's a great equalizer.
Yeah, maybe
And
we should all get up and dance. No, but we always say if you're too shy, just close your eyes. At least then you can dance in your own little bubble,
yes.
and that helps a little bit. But I think by the third session, we had the same energizer, and then by then people were like, it's again just like repeating these like discomfort exercises as well as like super fun in the same way that I guess I throw myself through the uncomfortable situations is what I also try to do in my facilitation. But actually, on the flip side of that, a little bit off topic, maybe.
No such thing.
But I have endometriosis, which is a menstrual disease, autoimmune disease condition. It's all up in the air because there isn't much research about it. But I live a lot of my life in like physical pain because of it, not just around my cycle, but also throughout the month. And so even though I'm really good at like dealing with discomfort in that sense, it has come, especially in my health wise, I've become so good at being uncomfortable and sitting in pain that it has like led to some negative effects where I'm like so much in pain that I haven't gone to seek medical attention and things like that. So again, it's like one of those skills where it's like amazing. I can sit here in front of you and you don't know that I'm going through 50 million cramps right now, which I'm not, by the way. And now I'm kind of unlearning as well, vocalizing discomfort instead of just sitting with it. Because there is a skill to sitting in the discomfort of like throwing that tit or like dancing in a room of like corporate CEOs in jackets or something. But there's also that added like skill of not only sitting in the discomfort and being comfortable with it, but actually voicing it has been really hard for me anyways, because I think I'm so used to it. I'm just like, yeah, it's whatever. Another hour and I can go home and actually let myself be myself. But now it's also learning like, okay, if I'm uncomfortable voicing it, or even to the clothes that I wear, like that's why I like having some of my clothes tailored, because I'm in so much pain that I need my clothes to just like fit like butter. I don't want to know that I'm wearing clothes. I don't want to be aware of it because I have other layers of discomfort on top of this. So that's just something that I wanted to add there because I thought that was at least
That's
the
really
journey
important.
I'm on right now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that, I mean, that is such a, I don't know, it makes me think of so many things that I don't know where to start, but it's because I think it's something, obviously in your situation, I mean, you go through these pains that probably not, I mean, most people don't go through these kind of pains, but I do know, and I'm just really thinking mostly women that have things that, like, for instance, my wife, she can have terrible headaches. I can tell that she has a headache, but she won't complain about this. And she goes on, you wouldn't notice. You wouldn't notice that at all, which is like, if I have a headache every now and then, you'll know. You'll,
The world is gonna know.
you'll know I have a headache, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going into the sort of it's a female male thing. I don't think that probably is not exactly true, but there's probably a truth to that. So, I have my daughter also, she went through puberty. She's still a little bit in there, but having some really, sort of dark emotions and feelings and all that. And we never noticed, it took friends of hers to tell us because she was hiding that,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, this might not be exactly the same, but it somewhat makes me think of these things that there's so much more going on within people that you sometimes just don't know, but they are really important. And learning how to voice that, because we somehow feel that should not be part of the conversation or part of the situation or part of the context in which we work together. And, so if you have a team of people, there is this layer that and then there's this other layer that you actually really don't know,
The iceberg. Yeah.
but it does things to people and it explains things. So, yeah, so in a way it's kind of sad to hear, obviously, because it's not, I mean, obviously because you have
Yeah.
these
Never want somebody to
pains.
be in pain more
Yeah,
often than not.
but
Yeah.
also that it's just something that you don't, that is not normal to have that as part of just who you are, and everybody knows that. Because I think that's I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
reflection on
Yeah.
that.
And so
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
I was going to ask, like, Mm, and you said that you're working on now more voicing the discomfort.
Mhm.
What is the impact on the surroundings? Maybe
Mhm.
not the impact on you, but on the impact on the surroundings when you do share your discomfort.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, it actually does have impact on me as well to share it out loud.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I will say, for example, this past months, I've actually taken off of work to really focus on finding out. Obviously, I know what condition I have, but like there's a lot more scans and tests involved.
Yeah.
And talking out loud about it has released a level of stress because it's also a stress related condition. And then I actually feel physically less pain just by saying
Oh,
it out loud.
cool.
But then, of course, now with Crampy, which is a platform that I have, I the very first event I had was just about me actually finally saying it out loud, like, guys, I'm uncomfortable like 80% of the time, and none of you know it. My brother's in the room and he just looked at me with his eyes open, like, I had no idea. And I was like, well, how would you know? Because I would never tell you. And so it's allowing people to help me, but also allowing people to ask or informing them enough that they would ask questions towards other people. So it's also being observant in that sense. So a lot of the work I do with Crampy is just empowering people to not only voice when they're uncomfortable, be it in their work environment, their personal life, to their doctor, even. Oh my goodness, the amount of people who are like, I don't even go to the doctor when I have pain. I'm like, I think you need to go to the doctor if you're in pain. And like, oh yeah, but last time I went, yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's a whole nother topic. And then it's also like, as a person who's not in pain, how are you creating an environment where people are okay expressing that to you? So it's like both ends. So not just like me telling you I'm in pain, but if the person you're saying it to doesn't create an environment where you can receive it
Mm-hmm.
and actually do something with it. That's been the most interesting for me, because at first I thought it was like, oh, if I just tell people I'm in pain, they'll understand. But it's like, if you don't understand where I'm coming from, the context of it, or even open, it's again this whole idea of like, do I even care when I ask you the question, like, oh, how are you? Does this person actually care? Are they going to do something? And that has been super interesting, as well as not only voicing discomfort, but being able to have the capacity to, what do I do when somebody tells me they're uncomfortable now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do I do with this information? Am I actually going to do something about it? Can I do something about it? Do I want to do something about it? And all of those are like obviously okay. Somebody can tell you I'm in pain and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And you can choose to walk away. Absolutely. You don't have to save everybody. But just that you're aware of the actions that you can take once somebody says that to you is also something that I'm working on through Crampy. And that's why a lot of the conversations I have is not just with people who menstruate, but also the non-menstruators, and like really bridging that gap as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why with these workshops that we do for companies, we also often involve like leadership level, because they're the ones who you're going to be voicing your concerns to. And if they don't understand, then it's like top down, bottom up kind of
Mm-hmm.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Really. And because, of course, menstruation is it's not niche, but it's very specific, right? And
Not niche.
it's
Good
not
sentence.
niche.
That's a good
No.
sentence. I'm gonna have that on a t-shirt. Menstruation is not niche.
Translation is not niche. I love that. I'm going to keep that one in mind.
Yeah, you should.
Because it does feel like a niche topic, but it has a very, very like
Yes.
large impact.
Everyone is
Lot of
here
customers.
as a
Yes.
result of menstruation. Let's
Yes.
just be clear.
Yeah.
It's
But
not
it's
niche in my home, by the way. It's not niche in my home.
That's beautiful.
and it's very specific, right? Like there's like some kind of parameter around, there's physical implications, there's hormonal implications, there's
Mhm.
kind of like clear enough or not barrier, but like perimeter
Mhm.
on, okay, this pertains to menstruation, right?
Mhm.
But then if you can figure out, okay, this is how you can make talking about this more
Mhm.
comfortable, or hey, you share that you're coming to today's meeting with these things. Okay,
Mhm.
let's make space for that as well. Then how that, because to open up that template then in the future to, okay, well, let's have this apply to finances, or let's have this apply to psychological issues, or let's have this apply to, you know what I'm saying? There's so many other things that are impacting our daily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because a lot of people think that the work I do with Crampy is just about menstruation. But at least what I always say in the back of my head is this is just a case study for how you need to go about being a better human. And menstruation is just such a good place to start because there's so much discomfort. And for me as well, it's a very easy one to talk about because I go through it obviously every month and I have very physical and like there's a lot to
Yeah.
talk about there. But it's actually just a case study, like the same like we teach in the workshops the how to get to generative listening through the theory U method and so on. You don't need to know that like that's not just a menstruation exercise. Like if you want to talk about your relationship at home, you want to talk about your finances, you want to talk about your neurodivergence, like it's the same exercise. We're just giving it to you in this context because then you have something to like attach it to and learn. And although I'm super fascinated about menstruation and I love talking about it, and Crampy will always talk about menstruation, I always at the end say, or Jasmine as well, we always say, like, this is just a case study. Like, everything you've learned right now, you go home and you use it. Like, listen to your relatives, listen to your partner at the fourth level. You know, I'm not just saying, like, use it at work only when your colleague is talking about her painful period. Like, it's not like in this box. Go home and use it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about like because I have women at home, and so like, how do we talk about that? Actually, yeah, we do. It's also somehow there's also so I've done some work for a program that was run by a professor at a hospital here in the Netherlands, and she's the professor of sex and gender medicine. And one of the things that was really shocking to me, to be honest, was that science, medical science, and to people, specialists and doctors, etc., we don't know that much about the female body. Like, because everything is actually designed for men and geared
Yep.
towards men.
Yep.
Medicine. This is why, for instance, so like I said, my wife can have terrible headaches, but the paracetamol and the painkillers don't really work that well on women because they're designed for men. Everything really is. And also the way doctors are taught to diagnose patients is towards the male physique, the male body. So like heart, for instance, if a man gets a heart attack, there are certain things that happen, certain pain, certain things that you can, and then say, oh, I think you might have
Yeah.
a
These are
heart
the
attack.
signs of a heart attack. Yeah.
But the female body responds differently. So, but the same with things like Parkinson, things, all kinds of symptoms are different with women than with men. So men get sent to specialists, women get sent to a psychologist or being told you must be really
In your head.
stressed. You're probably very stressed, right? So this is really happening. So if you have a female doctor, you're lucky because typically they kind of have a little bit better of an understanding, but even they don't really know everything.
Yeah, I
And
mean, recently my doctor admitted to me that she didn't know, and I think that gave me more relief than her pretending that she knew, to be honest.
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. And I was like, oh, thank you. You know,
Yeah.
just for being honest and being like, you don't know. Like, I'd rather use that than make up a story and like prescribe me something that I don't need because that has
Exactly.
happened a lot.
yeah,
And in terms of like medicine and so on, women were often, well, not often, they were like, how do you say that? Taken out of medical trials because there was a fear that they would alter the results. And I'm like, that's exact alteration of the results
well,
is what you should have
exactly.
been
Yes,
researching to
but
begin with.
it happens with mice. It starts even with mice when they do
Yeah,
tests
yeah,
on mice. They do it with the male, like, not because of this reason.
That's
yeah. I'm like,
insane.
that
But you go
exact
like,
variance is exactly where you need to go and put a microscope and be like, what is happening here? And I'll be like, this is messing with our data. It's like, if as a scientist, for me, like when we did design and stuff, we
yeah,
we learn how to do research and I'm like, as a scientist, how do you see a variance in data and decide to remove the variable rather than investigate further? For me, it's honestly you're not really being a scientist, then it's kind of, it doesn't make sense to me. Like
Yeah.
if something is changing, I want to understand why, not, oh, this is going to hurt our data. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it makes me very angry. I don't want to talk about it. But the good,
Well, it should make you. It should
Lots of,
yeah,
yeah,
make all
should
of us
make us
angry.
angry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it should make all of us. I mean, it is.
Widespread systemic failure. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why we're in this public health crisis right now.
Mm,
But the good news is there's a lot of companies out there that are doing research. I mean, even in the time that I've been diagnosed with endometriosis, which is 4 years, we've
Mhm.
gone from you need to have an internal exam and laparoscopy and things like that to be diagnosed, to now there's like pre-trials of just a blood test, like in the 4 years. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
how much money has been put into like funding for women. And there's
Mhm.
also companies now that finally are testing menstrual blood, and they find stem cells in menstrual blood, so we won't even have to do these like extensive stem cell through the bone marrow extractions. You might just be able to bleed into a cup and give people stem cells. Like it's incredible the things that we're missing.
mm.
And it's been just a gross neglect from the science world and the medicinal world. And I think now we're finally catching up really fast, which is very exciting. But it's interesting as well when you talk about like from a design perspective. And I obviously come from design, and when I think about like, I drive cars often, and the fact that the seatbelt is probably not as safe for me as it is for my brother who sat right next to me. And for
Mm.
pregnant women and things like it's all over. And I really went through a phase where I was quite angry at the world, because as somebody who designs things, it never occurred to me to not test on everyone. So it's a really interesting situation to be in, and finally actually notice, like, sometimes I'll sit at the chair in a bar and I'll be like, this chair is so uncomfortable. And there's like my guy friend next to me, and he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, I guess this nobody, maybe they didn't test this chair on women or something.
We don't test chairs, furniture on women. I mean, they're
They don't need to
we
sit
design.
down.
Yeah,
You know?
why would you sit down?
Why
Give me a
would you
beer.
test? And it's even in the clothes you wear. And these are some of the topics that I also want to touch on in my work as a designer. It's like clothes that we wear. Why am I sitting in jeans that are too tight for me and are maybe causing me to have like some even internal damage somehow? Like, I think they found that like wearing skinny jeans over a long period of time can actually like be super bad for you because of like how tight it is. But nobody talks about that, because maybe a man designed the jeans for the male body at some point and women just started wearing them. But there was never like a, let's investigate what this does, until it started causing like adverse effects. And that's always the thing with like design, at least up until now, is we only ever investigate when something goes wrong, and
Mhm.
there isn't so much testing done in the preliminary phases
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
prototyping of things. And that's something that I'm very aware of now as well in the work that I do, is doing a lot more testing upfront rather than waiting for failure later. And I wish a lot more companies did that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
have you always, because, and as you're talking about your design practice or, yeah, mindset, a lot of awareness toward the impact on others
Mhm.
and not just, others that are the same, but
Mhm.
also others that are different in
Mhm.
whatever way. And so has that always been a part of kind of like either your outlook growing up, or was it something that you picked up over the years, or how has that kind of emerged?
I don't know. I would say that I've always been quite aware of others than myself, be that a trauma response or not. I'm not sure, probably. Like I said, I'm very self aware of, well, not self aware, I'm very outwardly aware of other humans. And I guess first it was just through observation, but now it's very much like in everything. Like all of the things that I hold, like me and my friends, we've had extensive conversations about like even the way we, like I said, this, we sit in chairs and so on. And the more that I have these kind of conversations, the more I want to investigate. But I will say that I've always been quite aware of how other people are feeling or experiencing things. And maybe at first it wasn't related to design, it might have just been just
In
being
general,
aware
yeah.
of people in general. And now, because I do this work, it's very much focused on that. And even when I create the events that I do with Crampy or design things at work, it's always been about designing things and not just ideating them or imagining them. So I'm very, how do you say that, particular and very, like, I just apply design thinking to every element in my life. So be that, like, I literally hosted a panel and I was like, how do we see people in such a way that the room feels open? Like, it's always, it's just in the way that I think about things now. I don't know when that came about, but I will say that I'm always aware of it at all times. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. And so are there, and of course your things, how long has Crampy's been? Oh,
It's gonna be a year in September, I think.
okay. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there's Crampy that you're working on. Are there any other cool projects or
Mhm.
things that you're working on or want to work on that you get really excited about?
I think right now my biggest life project, I think, which is gonna take me probably to the end of this lifetime, is Crampy. I don't know what that's gonna look like in the coming years. Obviously now I'm really focused on starting with menstruation and just opening conversation. And I've done a few events, and the more that I do events, the more I'm like, okay, people need spaces where they can feel comfort, where they can feel restful, where they can feel open to having these conversations. And right now I've been doing a lot of things specifically in relation to menstruators, and I'd like to venture into non-menstruating bodies and how they feel and how they relate to the world, because I as a menstruator can only talk about what that's like, and I don't know what
Mhm.
it's like for for the other side. And so I think it's interesting now that I'm in the space of like starting with the conversation on menstruation and how I can, take that more into like designing objects and events and experiences. And yeah, that's what I'm most excited about, to be honest. There is no other project that excites me as much as that, and that I would like to talk about. Sorry.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's
Mhm.
really cool.
Yeah.
I think you are kind of getting into a sort of a space that is way bigger than menstruation. It's way bigger than because so I kind of so the name Crampy is really good because being in a sort of it can have being in a cramp, being sort of
Yeah.
kind of even that whole
I
visual.
call it for when you're feeling crappy because you have cramps, and then it's just like crampy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's I think it's a
I
great.
instantly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I get it. But it is this uncomfortableness that we all experience, and but by sharing that, it doesn't take away the pain, but it might relieve it a little bit, and it makes it something that you can talk about, and that helps, and that kind of links a little bit to something we talked about right at the beginning, or you mentioned just when you introduced yourself. It was community that was something that you felt very strong about sort of being. So I was wondering, is there in this whole kind of design and this the whole thing that you're doing with Crampy, but also the way you kind of move throughout the world and with your friends, and how is community part of this?
Yeah. Community is at the center of it. I grew up in a culture where community is everything. Like, community is your currency. In that sense, it's also about who you know, where you know them, and things like that, for better or for worse sometimes. I And that's also why I live in this community that I live in now, because I feel very connected to it. And the whole idea of Crampy is just creating a space where people feel comfort, and that comes from having the right people around you, which is in essence just a community, people that you feel comfort around, that you feel some kind of connection to. And that's where these conversations stem from. And I think community for me is that I don't ever want to do something alone, in that sense, at least in my design work. Obviously, I can make this beautiful vase just at a ceramics class and enjoy it, but I feel that a lot of the beauty in that is having sat in that ceramics class with people around me and so on, and just like looking at what they're doing and being like, oh, they're kind of using that tool, and now I'm going to use it this way too. And that
Mm.
might just be like the observer in me, but I find that being surrounded by people just amplifies the overall experience of something. And not to say that I never do anything alone, because I'm also an introvert. So I do spend quite some time just in my bed contemplating life. But when I do work and when I do creative work, it's always in a group. Like the workshops that I do are with Jasmine, and a lot of the Crampy events I've done are in collaboration with friends. So it's always a collaborative effort, because I find that then somebody can always check you on your bullshit. Sorry for the use of the word, but it's just, you always need somebody who can just be like, oh, but have you thought about it this way? And I really like those moments and ideating together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That's really cool. And don't worry about the word bullshit. You've been throwing around tits. So I don't know why bullshit is a problem all of a sudden. It's very funny. Yeah. It's so interesting. The professor I was talking about, I'll send her, her LinkedIn to you. It's Sabine.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think she'd be really interesting to talk to. She has also been part on the podcast, by the way, but I've done some work with her. She's so inspirational. And she works a lot with young people and startups in that kind of space. So she might be really, just as a person to get to know. I think
Definitely.
Yeah, she would love to hear your story as well. And so, what would you like to happen to Crampy? What would you kind of, what would be what's your dream?
Wildest dreams. Yeah.
My wildest dream would be to make Crampy into some kind of studio where we just experiment with things. Because I think obviously now the beginnings of it's also my personal journey, right? And I think I forget that sometimes, that it's me even coming to terms with what menstruation, obviously I know what it is, but I feel like a lot of people don't really understand the entire concept of what menstruation is and to what extent it impacts our day-to-day lives. And so it's kind of this journey of me going from understanding my body and how it works and going on this very personal journey and like inviting people into it so they can go on their like parallel journeys, and then together in the future hopefully we can go from not just understanding what it is that we're going through, but to like actively building scenarios and objects and events and things like that are just beneficial to everyone. So going from introspective, like I think that's the stage that Crampy's at now, is like turning inwards and figuring out what it means for you as a menstruator, as a non-menstruator. And then like once understanding that, like turning it outwards and being like, okay, how do we go into this world and redesign everything basically? And so I think that's where I want it to be, like to just become a studio where we experiment with everything we thought we knew and how do we reinvent that, coming from this knowledge bubble basically. And I cannot say more than that because I don't know, but that's where I'm going.
Cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's really cool. It's really cool.
Thank you. We've been talking for a long time. I could talk more. So I would love to kind of, follow up when you, while you're developing Crampy, and I'd love to hear more about
I think,
your journey.
yeah. And it's exciting because, I mean, we asked who you are as a person. We didn't really touch into your professional accomplishments, but even in quite a short time, there's been quite a few incredible professional accomplishments. And so I think it's also very exciting to have you on because you are, you're just now hitting this wave, there's this energy coming with you, where a lot of our other guests, have ridden this wave for a while now. So it's a different perspective on the same energy, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So
No, thank you so much for having me. It's also so nice to sit back and reflect on some things. And, I never reflect too often on my childhood. So that was very nice at the beginning and just kind of connecting the dots. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for sharing and thanks for joining.